Hey there, my name's Nicole and this is my channel where I talk about all things Disney, duh. And welcome to Skipper Sunday, my friends, where I tell you stories about my experience working as a Jungle Cruise skipper back in 2018. And today I'm going to be answering the question, can Jungle Cruise boats sink? So the reason I wanted to do this video is back in February, a little incident happened over at the Jungle Cruise where a boat allegedly sank. And it had a lot of people asking the main question, which is, wait, Jungle Cruise boats can sink? So here is my professional skipper, opinion on this topic and kind of some insights. So super funny side story before we really get into it is that I was actually working over at Fantasmic when this occurred. I was doing my second Disney college program. Jungle Cruise was my first college program, and people over at Fantasmic knew me as a former Jungle Cruise skipper because I talk about being a skipper a lot. If you haven't noticed from my channel, I like to tell Jungle Cruise stories. But ironically, on that day, February 28th, I was off work. The news quickly spread like wildfire that a Jungle Cruise boat had sank over the Magic Kingdom. And of course, everyone's looking around. They're like, where's Nicole? Where's Nicole? Because everybody at Fantasmic was like, we have to know what's going on. And sure enough, I was off that day. And I wasn't there to explain it. So everybody was like freaking out at Fantasmic because they're like, seriously, the one day we could really use Nicole to tell us a Jungle Cruise story, she's not here. So that happened, but here I am. I'm here to explain to you guys what happened within reason. Obviously I wasn't working at Jungle Cruise at the time, and I'm still on a lot of the Jungle Cruise pages because I absolutely adore and love following the skips and keeping up with everybody on a very like public front. They were told by coordinators to not post anything about the story, and nobody was really talking about it over on the Facebook page, and I didn't want to be rude and like ask because like I'm a retired skipper, like it's not really in my place. But let me tell you what I was told in training and my experience working at Jungle Cruise and why technically boats at Jungle Cruise cannot sink. And that is in the sense that I would argue that there is a difference between a boat sinking and a boat taking on water. So let's kind of dive in a little bit here. And so first of all, before we really get into the video, I want to be clear that there are magic spoilers in this video, which magic spoilers are kind of behind the scenes secrets. So if you are not interested in like magic spoilers ruining the magic, or if you have little ears standing nearby that you need to preserve the magic for, pause this video, watch it later, or go and find a different Skipper Sunday video that is not filled with magic spoilers. But this one, obviously, we're gonna have a few behind the scenes secrets. So number one secret that is, I don't think a big secret, but some people legitimately don't know this, is that Jungle Cruise is indeed on a track. What? The skips, we do not steer the boats. It is a trough system, basically like a big trench with there's trough in the center of it. So here is what also is true about Jungle Cruise, is that all the Jungle Cruise boats are real boats. They actually are buoyant, they float in the water for real, and we actually have the steering ability to move them forward and backwards. So they function in a lot of ways like a regular boat does. So what does that mean with it being on that trough system? Is basically what we were told in training is that just like any boat, they can also take on water. So this is true of Jungle Cruise boats, and in fact it happened to me on my college program. I was on the very boat that sank, which is the Bertha. And what you should know about the Bertha is that she is one of our ADA boats. So ADA boats, actually we have 2 of them over at Jungle Cruise. We always have one on the river, and those are boats that have a wheelchair lift in them, so that if a guest is unable to transfer out of a wheelchair, we are able to load them onto our ADA boat. So we have Wanda and we have Bertha, and 90% of the time Wanda is on the river because she is our more stable, I want to say, ADA boat, whereas Bertha, she's a little bit of a wild child, I should say. She doesn't have great audio. She's really slow. Like, you normally have to tell more jokes on her because she's moving a little slower, and she tends to have more mechanical issues than Wanda does. But unfortunately, we can't always have Wanda on the river. Sometimes Wanda has her bad days too, so we have to pull her off and we have to put Bertha on the river because, like I said, we always do have one of our ADA boats on the river. And so you know it's not always a great day if you see Bertha on the river. You know that something happened to Wanda. When Bertha's on the river, it's gonna be one of those days. And for the skips over at Jungle Cruise on that day, it definitely was one of those days. So I actually had a situation where one day I was on Bertha. They both have the wheelchair lift, and you will sometimes notice water in the lifts a little bit because of the mechanical system there. For some reason, something about the, like, again, I'm really bad at science, so I'm not going to use really great like engineering terminology, but basically the system that the lift, when you go up and down, you will sometimes see water down in there. Something about that system sometimes takes on a little bit of water. Normally we don't have to worry about it. It's more or less when you're starting to see a lot of water that you speak up. So I happened to notice that she seemed to have a little bit more water in the lift than usual. So I let my coordinator know before I was pulling up to load, like, hey, she's looking like she's got a lot of water in there. And they're like, okay, that's not good. But they're like, you know what? I think you can do one trip and then we all plan to like drop her and bring Wanda out. I made it through the boat, but I noticed about halfway through that there was actually water coming out of the lift. Thankfully, she was not loaded. There was nobody in the lift at this point. But it was obvious she was taking on a little bit of water. Thankfully, in my case, she did not take on more than like maybe 1/4 of an inch of water. Like, it didn't even cover the bottom of the boat, but she was obviously taking on some water, and we were needing to drop her before, you know, it got bad. It happens, and more specifically, it is more likely to happen with our wheelchair boats just because of the mechanics of the wheelchair lift on them. So I cannot for the life of me understand what happened on that day over at Jungle Cruise. I look at the pictures, and one, I can see that the boat is Bertha. The other thing is I can tell that it looks like they were over by the gorilla camp, which is at the very beginning of the ride. You know, really all you have before gorilla camp, like, you have the Amazon rainforest with the butterflies, you have Inspiration Falls, you have Pygmy Beach, Python, and then it's gorillas. Yes, don't worry, I literally have it memorized. I can see the entire Jungle Cruise in my head. You would too if you did it 10 times a day for 6 months of your life. So they were very much like within like the first, I would have to say, like 3 minutes of the attraction. So what happened from the time they left the dock to getting to the gorilla camp that they had literally taken on all this water? I have no idea. I can't even imagine what that skip had to be going through. Also, by looking at the pictures, I'm very thankful. It looks like she was not loaded. There was nobody in a wheelchair loaded in the lift. Let me explain a little bit more of what we were told in training as to Jungle Cruise boats taking on water. When we were training to become skippers, they basically told us, like, hey, just so you know, like, these are real boats, so like real boats, they can take on water. So here is what you do. If you notice your boat is taking on water, you're going to remain calm. 90% of the time, that is what Disney training tells us, is to remain calm. You're gonna remain calm, and you're going to explain to the guests that the boat may take on water, but it will not sink because it sits on the track. So basically, if a boat is taking on water, what is going to happen is that it is going to take on water to about, you know, your knees. And then once it gets to the track, it's literally just gonna sit there on the track and it's gonna stop sinking. So you will see in pictures, you will see that the boat did take on a significant amount of water. Benches were actually covered. However, the boat itself did not completely sink. And I'm not saying that that's like a fun situation, because obviously it's not fun. You're probably going to get wet, and obviously you don't really want to be wet with Jungle Cruise water. I certainly wouldn't want to be. However, those guests were probably not in a dangerous situation, and it's just more of like a highly inconvenient situation until they were able to go and get rescued, and somebody was able to pull them out of the boat and get them onto either a different boat or get them onto land and evacuate them safely. So with that being said, technically no, Jungle Cruise boats cannot sink. They will occasionally take on water, which is not great, but it sounds like the guests were given really good recovery. I know that for sure Disney did go and buy them all new, dry, clean clothes, because yeah, that water is not clean. You would not want to wear those clothes. I would probably even consider throwing those clothes away. I don't even know if I would trust washing them. Honestly, that water is so gross. There's also dye in it, so that's why I say like those clothes are probably not even going to recover. The only place I would be concerned would be over in the hippo pool, because for most of the ride, everywhere the river is actually only about 3 to 4 feet deep. But the exception to that is the hippo pool, where it's actually 7 to 8 feet deep, which, speaking of which, another fun fact and Jungle Cruise spoiler is that we actually they're not like full hippos under the water. They're really only like half hippos, and you just see like their upper half, but the mechanics stay under the water and you can't see it. So whenever you have a Keys to the Kingdom tour on your boat, which is basically a paid tour, part of that tour is to actually ride the Jungle Cruise, and your tour guide gives you like a special behind the scenes tour of Jungle Cruise, which I always loved, because that meant that basically I just got to stand there and pretend to steer the boat while the while the tour guide talked. But they always make the joke where they're like, I guess you could say we have half-opotamus or hippo-bottomless. And I laughed at that joke every single time. But the main reason I bring it up is that I am curious what would happen. Again, I don't think the boat could still sink, because it is still obviously sitting on the track, but I'm just saying it would be not fun to have to evacuate people from hippo pool, that is for sure. And we never recommend that people end up in the river. Thankfully, the whole time I was a skipper, nobody ended up in the river. So I'm not really sure how they got guests off, but I'm sure that Disney being Disney, they were very safe about it, and again, gave them great recovery. So you guys will have to tell me, what did you think? Do you agree with me that Jungle Cruise boats can't sink? Or you're like, nah, Nicole, that boat sank? You'll have to tell me. And thank you guys so much for joining me for Skipper Sunday. Don't forget to join me tomorrow for Mickey Mystery Monday, where we're going to be playing a fun game. I'm super excited. But speaking of tomorrow, remember that together we can create a big, bright, beautiful tomorrow. Thanks for watching, friends, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!